Geo Gang. I hope that you are having a good week. Today we are going to go over some of the definitions that you're going to need for taking apart stories. And some of them might be reviews, some of them might seem brand new. Either way, that's perfectly acceptable. So we're just going to get to it. Now, if you are in my live class right now, you can stop me and ask questions and pause and all that good stuff. And if you're using this as a resource later, just go ahead and pause it yourself whenever you need to. You will have a form that looks almost exactly like this, except it's going to have blanks in it. And so your job is to find the information in the blanks and fill it out so that you have it for later. All right, so the first one, we're starting very basic with characters. So characters are people, animals, or personalities who take part in the story. So go to your form, see where your blanks are, get those filled in. People, animals, or personalities who take part in the story. So a character can be a table if that table has a personality and is talking to other characters. It's not very common because it's not very interesting, but it still counts. So now we're going to learn about the different types of characters that you see in a story. So first off is what is called an antagonist. Antagonist, and whenever I have something in parentheses broken down underneath like that, that's just my way of helping you pronounce the word in case it is new to you. So antagonist, antagonist. So an antagonist is someone who is against the main character. Because anti, the prefix anti, and antagonist literally means against. So look for the blanks in your paper. Antagonist, someone who is against the main character. Anti means against. And before we do static, let me just skip ahead to protagonist, and then we'll go back to that one. So protagonist, a little pronunciation underneath, is the main character. Now the main character is usually the hero because the prefix pro in protagonist means for. I am for this. So now a protagonist is not always the hero now, and that's what's important to start to understand when you're in middle school and all that, because we learn a lot of the same standards each year in language arts and all your other classes, but it's done in a spiral. So we keep coming back to the same topics, except we get them a little more in-depth of an understanding of them. So the protagonist is the main character. It is usually the hero, but not always. So for instance, if we go back to the Joker here, in almost every single Batman movie, cartoon, video game, comic, whatever, the Joker is the antagonist because he's the person against the main character. They have to fight it out to see who wins. Now, there was the Joker movie that was released recently, and in that movie, even though the Joker was not the hero, he was the main character. It was Arthur Fleck. It was his movie. We followed him, his choices, his interests, his passions. The Joker was our main character. But he still wasn't a good guy, and he definitely wasn't a hero. So it's important to know the difference now, that protagonist is always the main character, but not always the hero. Usually the hero, though. No, I hope that I made that one clear. Go ahead and ask questions, type questions below if anything is unclear. So after that, we did antagonist and protagonist. So then now we're going to do static characters. So we dealt with the two characters that have to do with mostly being good or bad. But now static just means that any of the characters in your book or story who don't change or grow. I use Lord Farquaad because it's a good way to remember it, because he didn't grow emotionally or physically. Big joke that, Lord Farquaad was very short, so he did not grow. And so static characters can be good or bad, though. It's not a positive or a negative trait to not grow. Sometimes in books and in movies, you just need characters that fulfill their function. They're not the ones who are out to learn the life lesson. They start one way, they pretty much end that way. And so that's how you know you have a static character. Now, in life, you probably don't want to be too static for too long, but in books, it's not good or bad. So make sure that you are filling out your blanks in your sheet that is static. Now we're going to go back down to dynamic. So dynamic is the opposite of static. Dynamic characters, they do change. They do grow as people. And the way characters in books and movies change is they are changed by events, they are changed by other characters. I put events twice. So these characters are the ones that come across their conflicts and struggles, they meet other people, and through that they grow in some way and become better as a person by the end. It's also not a good or bad thing. But as long as a character is changing as a person, they are affected by the world around them, they are dynamic characters. For instance, in Harry Potter, if you put, in just the first book, Harry might be considered the only dynamic character, or at least Harry, Hermione, and Ron, because by the end of that first book, they have a lot of their same character traits, but they've also grown, they've become braver, Ron's gone up against some troubles, Hermione's gone up against things, and they grew and became friends. The books as a whole, if you go through the whole series, Neville becomes a very dynamic character. He changes a lot from beginning to end and stuff like that. So it's dynamic. You grow, you change, you're affected by your surroundings. So pause it if you haven't filled that in, or tell me to stop. So next we have flat characters and round characters. There we go. So flat and round, these deal with how much we know about the characters. So how much we know about them. So a flat character is more of a background character. We don't know much about them. We usually tend to know one thing about them. They have their one job in the story, and that's what they're there for, as far as we're concerned. In the author's imagination, they might have huge, interesting lives, but for us, the reader, we don't know a whole lot about them. So, in this picture from the Harry Potter books is Seamus? I don't know. But he is the student who, no matter what, he always causes fires. He tries to do magic, he works really hard, but inevitably, this poor kid always starts a fire instead. So when the author's like, okay, I need a distraction in this story, okay, well, I'm going to pull out this character because he's going to accidentally start a fire, and that's going to give us the distraction that we need. So he's a flat character. Next, on the opposite end of that spectrum, we have round characters. So we know a lot about them. So we know their personality, we know their age, we know their background, we know what types of things that they think about or they struggle with. And so they're just fleshed out, they're round on their personalities. So flat and round characters also have nothing to do with whether they're good or bad. It just is. Either we, the reader, know a lot about them, or we, the reader, do not know a lot about them. And lastly, for characters, we have the foil. So the foil, the job of the foil is to make the main character look better. The foil is usually not good or bad. A lot of times the foil can be a good person, but the foil makes the main character look better by being clumsy, silly, bullied, or always in trouble, always making mistakes. And so here, from the Harry Potter, the first book and movie, you have Neville Longbottom, and he's a sweet boy, but he just always gets into chaos no matter what. Something always goes wrong. He's always the one made fun of, he's always the one picked on, he's always the one bullied, and even he noticed it by this scene where he's like, why is it always me? Why am I always the one that stuff happens to? It's like, well, that's because you're the foil. Sorry to tell you. So the best example of a foil, and this is this young man, has this ball that his grandma sent him that's really important to him, and a bully comes and takes his ball. Okay, so his job ends there after he's kind of like, no, give it back, it's important and I need it. So this situation gives the main character, Harry, an opportunity to start confronting some of the bad guys without looking like a jerk. So now Harry, our main character, steps up and protects this poor young kid and, goes to the bully and he's like, give that ball back and make me. Oh, okay, I'm gonna make you. And so through that, we learned that our main character is brave. We learned that he helps out the little guy. And then the main character himself learns that he's really good on a broomstick, which he didn't know beforehand. And so that whole situation with this poor kid Neville happens so that the author can show us these traits of the main character and make the main character look good, like he defends others. So that is going to end the character part of this presentation. So please make sure that you have all of your blanks filled out. I know it's always a little more boring when I have to give the information, but we're going to be starting stories, and I want you to have this vocabulary. And even if we briefly touched on it last year, I'm going to hit it again and make sure that it sinks in and you really remember all of the terms and what they mean. And thank you so much. Here's a bit about what your sheet might look like. And next we will move on to conflicts. Shki.